everything else, from the lead sourcing to the lead filtering to the personalized message generation to the sending of the message to the analysis and to the labeling of that message are all handled by the AI system. And that, I think, is one of the most exciting aspects or outputs from a system like this. Hey guys, so earlier last year we were approached by a hair transplant hospital based in Turkey and tasked with the challenge of helping replace their previously very outdated outreach strategy and build for them a highly targeted and personalized LinkedIn outreach system. Now, the system of ours helped them move away from the previously very poorly performing one-to-many outreach approach and move them into this new one-to-one hyper-personalized approach that completely changed the way that they generated new business going forward. In this video, I'm going to break down how exactly we did this. So without further ado, let's get into it. Before we get into the technical side of things, I do think it's important to just pause and take a bit of an audit on what the system was actually addressing. So what were the areas that actually needed to be improved? And then from there, we can understand why we did what we did. So taking a look at why their outreach was failing in the first place. Point number one being low response rates. And this came down to the fact that they were sending out mass messages to prospects with no real personalization. So just going out into social media, finding people who they think would need hair transplants and sending them a generic message and expecting to get amazing results. Point number two, poor targeting. They obviously had no way of actually filtering through leads or prospects and finding people that actually needed hair transplants at mass. They had to go and do this themselves with more of a sales rep to one-on-one search, send a message approach, which obviously it's not scalable and is just not a very efficient way to do things. The number three, there was no follow-up system. Once the sales reps did actually reach out to people, there was no CRM tracking and there was no way for them to actually be held accountable on whether they followed up with those people once they messaged them. I want to make it clear that this project was not solving a very complicated issue, but from here, we were able to change the way that they generated new business through tackling these three problem areas. All right, so now that we understand the issues, we can actually start talking about how we address that. Point number one, with the very poor response rates. We addressed this by AI-driven personalization. We ensured that every lead that we reached out to received a personalized message based on studying their LinkedIn profile. Not only was the message crafted by AI, but also the sending of it was automated through the integration partner PhantomBuster, which we'll get into a bit later. Point number two, using AI vision for precision targeting. Now, this was really the powerhouse of the whole lead gen system. We actually used AI to filter through LinkedIn profile images and only select those who were bolding. Obviously, we had to train the model on how to identify whether someone was bolding or not, and we'll get into that process a bit later as well. But through this, we were able to generate a highly targeted and specialized lead gen list that we could then start targeting with these personalized messages. And then point number three, AI-powered CRM and auto follow-ups. So not only were the messages sent automatically, not only were they personalized, but also based upon the response that we received from the candidates, the AI would then go and categorize that response. So essentially, if they were interested, label it as interested. If they were not, label it as not. If it was bad timing, label it as bad timing. Update that in HubSpot, and then also assign follow-ups where necessary. So these 3 points very concisely summarize the whole build, what business issues we addressed from 1 to 3, along with their corresponding solutions. Now that we've covered the scope of the project from a business perspective, we can move into more of the technical side of things. And starting us off, I just want to give a brief background into the integration partners for this build. It was made on Make.com, and the softwares that we used in connection with Make.com was PhantomBuster, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and HubSpot. I'll get into the details of each of these, but essentially what PhantomBuster was used for was the both personal and company profile scraping, the auto connect, as well as initial message and follow-up message sending, as well as the inbox scraper, so that we could actually analyze who responded and in what way they responded. Number 2, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and we used this right in the beginning. That's just to generate the initial lead list that we can start filtering from. And then finally, number 3, HubSpot, the CRM system, where we kept track of everyone's lead status based upon what their response was on LinkedIn Messenger, and also then providing a nice database for the sales team to then go and use for further sales and follow-ups. Okay, so now hopping into the technical side of things, I'm going to take you guys into the background on how we used LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So very, very quickly, LinkedIn Sales Navigator is really where everything began. It's where we got our initial lead list from that we then filtered through to actually start the process of getting our targeted list of leads to write messages for. And then what I'm going to do for you guys is take you through the Sales Navigator platform and just show you how exactly we generated that lead list. So it starts off here by going to the Leads tab of Sales Navigator and creating a new list. Let's just make it leads and click on to create. All right, once we've made this lead list, you can then click into it and then just click on to search for new leads. And what we're going to do here is just start filtering down as far as we can according to what the client needs, and then really start using these targeting metrics that LinkedIn offers from the get-go as a starting point. So in the case of this client, we were looking for wealthy businessmen that were based in America, ones that could actually afford to fly out to Turkey to get this procedure done. So just for the sake of this example, we will select something like CEOs based in California. But really, I'm sure you can see all these metrics. You're able to go in here and actually filter down as far as you want. Then we've got some pre-filled metrics out here from my previous lead list. We filtered down for companies with a headcount of 500 to 1,000, and then I think the other one was Harvard University, just as an example. Once we've applied these filters, we've got a list of refined leads. We can now select all. Just a note from my side is that if you select all, it actually only selects on that particular page you're on. I'm not sure why. If you guys do know, please let me know in the comments below. But the only other way to get around is just to go through each page and just select all for each page if you want to get all those leads. Anyways, once you have them, click on to Save to List. Add these leads to the list that you've just made and then click on to Create and Save. Now, if you go back to the home page, you'll see your list of leads over here. You can just click into there and you'll see you've got all of those leads stored in this lead list for us to start using. This is exactly where we want to be before we move into the refining step. All right, now that we have that compiled list of leads, we're actually able to start with the Make.com automation side of things. Now, just a quick disclosure, I no longer have access to the Make.com account that I actually built these scenarios in. I did try my best to recover as much information as possible so that I could still present as much as possible to you guys and at least give you a strategic overview of the solution and how you can replicate the system for yourself. All right, so getting into it. This scenario was responsible for applying the AI vision section of the automation. Essentially what's happening here is that the lead list that we recently generated through LinkedIn Sales Navigator is passed into a Google Sheet through PhantomBuster, which I'll show you now. Once in that Google Sheet, this automation is applied, and what we'll start doing is analyzing the LinkedIn profile images. As seen in this scenario, the very first analyzer agent, as we call it, is an Anthropic module, and we've trained this AI on what to look for in order to determine whether someone actually needs the hair transplant or not. You'll see in the router module right next to it, this is basically just determining which Google Sheet to send it to. We have one Google Sheet for the people that we can simply ignore, and another Google Sheet for the hair transplant prospects. Now, if someone is seen to need a hair transplant, we pop that straight into the hair transplant Google Sheet. But if someone is seen to not need a hair transplant, the way we did this was we actually had a review agent then step in. So almost like a double check step, just to be very sure that we're not missing any quality leads. And this agent just double checks that this person doesn't actually need a hair transplant. If that person does, add them then to that hair transplant lead list. If they don't, we can ignore them. All right, and with this overview now given, I just want to take you into PhantomBuster so I can show you how we actually get that first step up and running, how we transport the LinkedIn Sales Navigator leads into this Google Sheet. So let's get into it. All right, so here we are now on PhantomBuster's website, and what I'm showing you here is the specific Phantom, as they're called. Phantoms are just like execution or tools that we can use to get something particular done. In this case, it's the Sales Navigator list export Phantom, and this is the one that you will need to actually transfer those LinkedIn Sales Navigator leads into a Google Sheet that you can then go and work with in that scenario that I just showed you. Once you've clicked onto the Use Now button, you'll be taken into the backend interface where you can start to tweak how exactly you want to use this Phantom. So starting things off, the first thing you'll have to do is just connect to your LinkedIn account. Second thing is you'll actually go and copy and paste that URL from the LinkedIn Sales Navigator lead list that I showed you earlier. Paste it in over here. Change any settings to make things more specific if you wish, and then click onto Save. Next, click onto the Behavior tab, and this is where you can just change number of leads, etc. Save that, and then Launch Settings is how often do you want to actually run this Phantom. And that's essentially it. This will then save to a particular Google Sheet, which is then the starting point of the scenario that I just showed you previously. And now, very important to note, the output from this Phantom is going to have various columns, each column with fields such as the person's first name, last name, the link to their LinkedIn profile image, and various fields after that. Obviously, for this case, what we're interested in are those first three, and that's what you need in that scenario. Now, with that PhantomBuster step explained, I just want to come back and give you a bit more background onto what that HTTP getter file step does. So with the Google Sheet, like I said, you're going to have various columns, including the person's first name, last name, and the link to their LinkedIn profile picture. So what we're using this HTTP getter file module for is to actually download that image from or based on that URL. And once we have that downloaded, we can then start to actually analyze it using the AI modules. All right, now getting into the very final stage of this whole project, this whole deliverable, breaking down the personalization, CRM management, and actual follow-up system. Now, this is where PhantomBuster and HubSpot really came together very well. So let's get into that. Here is the full Make.com scenario that handles this stage. I know it looks like a lot, but I'm going to give you the overall breakdown and then just take you guys through this step by step. As a very broad overview of what's happening in this scenario, we are now taking this hair transplant Google Sheet, the list of hair transplant leads that we've generated from the AI vision step, and we are performing a series of more detailed profile scrapes so that we can then use that information to write personalized messages, analyze whether those messages were responded to, and based upon those responses, categorize those leads in the HubSpot CRM. It basically handles the very final part of the whole outreach process. All right, so getting into the detail of the first section. How this whole process starts is we perform a scrape of the person's LinkedIn profile, and we start adding each of these scrapes to a new Google Sheet where we're storing our detailed list of prospects information. So the first step is the profile scraper module. What this moves into next is the HTTP maker request, which is just basically pulling the information from PhantomBuster into Make.com. This leads into an iterator step, which basically then just funnels through all of those leads one at a time, where we search through that final Google Sheet list of detailed prospect information, and we just determine whether that lead already exists or not. If the prospect is a new lead, then this router will branch down into the bottom row, which is basically just adding that lead's scraped information as a new row into this Google Sheet. As a next step, once we have that finalized, we're actually able to then use all of those fields that we've scraped from their LinkedIn profile and help generate a personalized message for them that we're going to be using later on. Now, what follows on from that is the first contact we have with HubSpot. We now have all this information about the lead. We now want to go and actually create a contact for them in our HubSpot CRM. Over here, important to note, we just have a filter, and I've just added this in here for clarity. So basically what's happening is that we are waiting for all these new leads to be added to the Google Sheets, as well as to HubSpot. Once complete, we can move on to the next phase of this bottom row, which is to then go and scrape their company information associated with that person. Again, just HTTP make a request module just to pull that information into Make and then iterate through each person and their company. So we're adding to that row of that person their company's information. So we're going to just be updating that row with their company information and then finishing all of this off with creating a contact in HubSpot for that company as well. Now, before I move into the very top row, I just want to go on to the next step, which is sending this personalized message to the prospect. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how to do that in PhantomBuster. All right, so now we're back onto PhantomBuster's end. Just important to note with regards to sending a message to the prospect. In order to do that, you first have to be connected to them. So we're going to have to use the LinkedIn Auto Connect Phantom as a first step. With this connection request, you're able to send them a personalized greeting message. Alternatively, what you're also able to do is first use this Phantom to connect with them. Once connected, you can then send out an automation to actually send them the full message, because a connection request message is often much shorter than what you're able to send if it's a general conversational message. All right, and moving into the message sender Phantom itself, this is what it would be. This is the one you would use, and I'll take you into the specifics of both of these now. So taking a look at the back end or the interface side of the LinkedIn message sender Phantom, the key to starting off this whole process is to actually have a list of profiles that you would like to message. And that's exactly what we just generated in the previous step in the make.com scenario. Now you have a Google Sheet with a list of prospects that you would like to message, as well as the AI message that you've crafted as one of the columns, as one of the fields that you can now pull. So what you want to do is just go and copy and paste the URL link to that Google Sheet into this field over here. Again, you're welcome to go and change any of the spreadsheet settings if you wish, and then save. Then just connect your LinkedIn account as per usual. Now for the actual AI message or the message in general that you would like to send. What's also quite useful over here is the conditions on when to send the message. You're able to control whether the person receives a message and if they should actually be receiving it in the first place. So an example of it being an outreach message, the field that you would like to select is the send only if there's no message at all. Now for follow-ups, which I'll get into a bit later, this will change. So you'll select that as the option. And now what PhantomBuster allows you to do is actually to call in variables that link to specific columns in your Google Sheets. So we generated a very specific AI message in the make.com scenario that I just showed you. We can now pull that through onto your message section and actually use that as the message itself. So let's just say, for example, that the column's name was AI_message. We can now actually refer to that as a variable, AI_message, and use that as the message itself. PhantomBuster will do the work of pulling that through. And so I'm sure you can see the power in this now. We're actually able to send these unique messages to each and every prospect based upon their LinkedIn profile information. And obviously, we've just used LinkedIn in this case because it was what was asked of us, but you really are able to use whatever input you would like, use that GPT module to craft the message and then pull it into PhantomBuster and use that to send it off to the prospect. So this is a very, very powerful step. Along with this, you can also send any documents or images if you wish, and then you're welcome to then move on. Email discovery, in this case, not applicable to us. And then again, the specifics of the behavior and the actual launch settings. All right, so hopping back into make.com, we've reached the stage where we've crafted a Google Sheet with a final list of leads with more detailed lead information, an AI message, which we've now been able to send through PhantomBuster, and creation of both the profile of the person as well as the company into HubSpot. So what happens next? In the case where we run the scenario and a lead comes in that already exists in the sheet, this top row is going to run. And what this top row does is just basically updates the row if there's anything that has changed over the course of the period where we last added them into the sheet. You will make those changes. And now what it's going to do is actually use a Phantom called a lead inbox scraper to actually go and analyze and pull through the response from that lead based upon your conversation with them. This HTTP make a request just pulls that information into make, and then again iterates through every one of the leads, checking through your inbox for every lead's response and making the necessary updates. What updates exactly? It's just going to be updating the response row that we've got, or the column, just to keep track of the conversation we're having with the prospect and what their most recent response is. And this step over here, again, super powerful. What it does is using a GPT module to analyze that lead's LinkedIn response and craft a HubSpot category that we can then use to update that lead on in HubSpot. So say, for example, we send out the message in this bottom row. In the top row, it scrapes our inbox and it sees that the conversation that we had with this prospect, the prospect said, sorry, it's a bad time, I'm not interested. What then happens is we can use GPT to analyze that response that we've now recorded in Google Sheets. We trained it now to associate certain labels with certain responses. It's able to assign bad timing to that response, and then actually go and update that both in Google Sheet just for record keeping, as well as update that lead status within HubSpot itself. And so we've essentially automated the creation of the personalized message itself, the sending of that message, the analyzing of the response to that message, as well as what HubSpot category to assign to that specific response. All in all, a very, very powerful automation once everything comes together. And so now where does this whole automation leave the sales team? They're left with a Google Sheet for reference, but I think more helpfully and more powerfully, they are left with a CRM that is constantly updating and refreshing itself with both new leads as well as new ways to categorize leads that are being engaged with. And from here, I think this AI system really highlights the whole end game of implementing AI solutions like this. It leaves the sales team with more time to simply focus on engaging with those interested leads or the leads that need the most attention. Everything else, from the lead sourcing to the lead filtering to the personalized message generation to the sending of the message to the analysis of the message and to the labeling of that message, are all handled by the AI system. And that, I think, is one of the most exciting aspects or outputs from a system like this. Alright guys, that does conclude the video. If you have any questions at all, please do drop them in the comments and I will try my best to respond to everyone. If you have any business inquiries, my email address can be found in the pinned comments under this video. And please let me know of any content that you'd like me to bring going forward. Chat soon.